And we're ready to go. All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Alan Ulrich, here with the suntanned, blonde-haired Bob Rose, who's still enjoying his summer. How you doing tonight, Bob?
I'm good, Alan. I'm enjoying what's left of it. We have a 90-degree week all week. Then, of course, Labor Day weekend, the last weekend that the pools are open, is supposed to be in the 70s and rain. So I'm enjoying what little I got left.
I hear you. We just have 90-degree temperatures all the time and 100% humidity. I'm over it. I really am. It's so miserable. It really is. You know, I watched this thing the other day about the Superdome because, you know, as you know, and a lot of you guys saw this if you watched the preseason game. The Superdome's had a lot of renovations done to it, inside and outside, getting ready for the Super Bowl, hosting the Super Bowl, and it really modernized the dome. And one of the things that's really good about the dome is the interior is such that you can do a lot of things to it, and still keep it modern. Well, basically, this guy was just upset that the Saints don't have an open air stadium. And he's like, yeah, I know it's warm and I know they get thunderstorms, but they got stadiums in Miami, open air in Tampa, and they got an open air stadium in Baton Rouge. I'm like, yeah, but Tiger Stadium like to play at night. You know, that's the part they didn't mention. But he's just going on and on about, you know, why the Superdome is basically outdated. Okay, despite all the renovations. But on the other hand, he's complimenting the stadium too. Well, my thing was, he never talked about it. Where the Superdome sits has a lot to do with why the Saints don't get a new stadium.
Yeah,
it's situated right in the middle of downtown. Hotels are in walking distance. The French Quarter's in walking distance. The infrastructure around the stadium, getting people in and out, is all there. And New Orleans is landlocked. You got a lake on the north, you got a river to the south, but it's really the west and the east. So you're kind of an island. You know, and you've got the Gulf, and there's really no place to build a new stadium. So you're kind of stuck with the Superdome, unless you want to tear it down and put an open air stadium there. And the guy even admits that, hey, if they tear the Superdome down, they lose a facility that can host concerts, host the Final Four, host a lot of things that are not football related to have a football only stadium. So at the end of his thing, he was like, but I still want a new stadium. I'm like, really? After you go through all that, really? So I did not go to the game, but I am looking forward to seeing all the renovations that are done to the dome. I like it. I really like how they try and constantly keep it fresh. Bob, are you going to be coming down at all this year to a game? Do you know?
Yeah, I plan on it for media coverage. Hopefully 2 home games and 2 away games. All of them have yet to be determined between finances, my oldest daughter moving again, this time potentially across the country. So, between finances, my daughter moving, the holidays, weather, etc. I don't know when they're going to be yet. This first time in a long time, I didn't have a good feel for what games I'd be going to and what games I wouldn't, as the calendar turns to September. But I will surely keep you and Debbie apprised, if me or we are coming down, and fans, I will keep all you guys abreast too, in case I will be, for when I'll be coming to New Orleans or any other town where you might be.
Good deal. If your daughter moves to Portland, Oregon, or moves out to Oregon, let me know. I got my nephew out there. He is like the official he lives actually in Vancouver, Washington now. He's moved to this next state over across the border, but he's right there. He is like an official travel guy for the Pacific Northwest.
Nice.
He loves it. He takes you out to hike in the mountains. He'll show you hidden lakes and all this stuff. And so I'm a little old to be hiking like that, but it's still good.
I might actually take him up on that because, Alan, as you know, I've traveled a lot, especially when I was a volleyball player, traveled a lot when I was a kid too. I've actually been to 39 states. Some of the states I have not been to: Alaska, Hawaii, not unusual. Neither of the Pacific Northwest states, Oregon or Washington. None of the New England states, north of New York. And oddly, Oklahoma.
I've been there.
You figure it out. I mean, I've been to Texas, Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, all the states around it, but not Oklahoma some way, somehow. But yeah, my daughter Brianna actually got a job offer in Bakersfield, California. And of course, the Saints are playing at the LA Chargers in late October, which would be around the time she would be moving. I volunteered to drive her car out there. So again, this is a very fluid situation that's happening with the Rose family, almost daily. So we'll see what happens.
I have some friends that are out in Bakersfield as well, because one of the jobs I had, I bought for companies that were out in Bakersfield, Santa Fe Springs, so forth. I'd be glad that I'll get in touch with him and try and help her out as best I can.
Cool.
I've been to 39 states, but I've been to a good 30 that I can think of. I'm just going through. There's a lot of the places you haven't been to, I haven't been to. I haven't, but one state I want to go to is Montana badly. I want to see the Big Sky country, Idaho.
Yeah, beautiful country. Yeah. Wouldn't live there. You couldn't pay me to live there, but I loved it. I loved the sights.
Been in Minnesota, crossed the Mississippi River, and it was like the Mississippi stream. But I've crossed that, some Mall of America, been there where the old Met used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, enough of the travel log. Let's talk about this new Saints roster. The official 53 has come out today. And you and I talked about this several times. We think that this 53 is not going to be the 53 that you see come 2 Sundays from now. First off, who surprised you that made the roster?
And you and I talked about this before we went on the air. The undrafted rookie wideout from Yale, Mason Tipton, surprised me. Not because he wasn't deserving. As a matter of fact, on my preseason roster prediction before they took the field against the Cardinals, I had Mason Tipton making the team because he was a monster throughout minicamp and the first few weeks of training camp. But then he hurt his hamstring, didn't play in any of the three preseason games, and I thought for sure that killed his shot at making the roster. I thought that at best, the Saints might try to stash him on IR for the year, give him sort of a redshirt season. Mm-hmm. Mason Tipton is the one that jumped out to me. If we're talking about surprises that made it, Mason Tipton, Kendall Vickers, the defensive tackle, surprised me a little. Not because he didn't play well. I just didn't think Kendall played quite as well as Christian Boyd or Kalen Saunders. But of course, Saunders is injured. We're going to get into some of the injured players in a little bit. Speaking of injured, equally surprised that Jalen Ford, the rookie linebacker from Texas, made it as well. Ford has been, at least Tipton was a standout in camp. Ford got to see the field very, very little because he was just so hurt. I think, again, we're going to segue into the injured players in a minute. I think Ford's one of those guys. Now that once the waiver period has cleared, and you can put guys on injured reserve and designate them for return, I think Ford and possibly Tipton, but definitely Ford, are going to be one of those guys to go on there. I think that's why they kept him, to try to keep him away from other teams initially.
I agree totally. I put up a mock 53, I guess you could say, back Saturday evening or Sunday evening, right after the game, who I thought was going to make the team, especially based on what I saw there. And I didn't have Tipton making the team. I didn't have Ford making the team, but I had Ford as a injured reserve kind of guy. I only have 5 linebackers, but 10 defensive backs. I couldn't do. So they've got 9 right now, and I couldn't do 6 linebackers and still keep 10 defensive backs. So I chose to put Ford on IR and go with 5. But that doesn't mean this is how it's going to be locked in. It's going to change, like we said. Somebody's asking why they cut Kyle Hergel. I think that's a guy they want to put on the practice squad.
Yeah.
I think it's just they felt like he can get through waivers and they can bring him back in the practice squad and work with him there. Guys that made the team, I think, like you said with Tipton, they were afraid they were going to lose those guys on the waiver. And yeah, you're right. They kept Vickers because of the Saunders injury. I think Vickers is one of those guys that are probably going to move to the practice squad once they feel good about Saunders being able to come back.
Yeah, he feels like a guy that's going to be on and off of the active roster situationally all year.
Yeah, I have 4 defensive tackles, and the Saints ended up keeping 5. So, I wasn't the bottom half of the roster. I was really unsure about. The punter getting cut, Lou Headley, didn't really surprise me.
No.
I even said in my thing, I've got Headley on the team, but I'm calling that 49ers punter, Presley, to bring him in. I think they're going to still look at other punters right now. I think right now they've got, what is his name? Haybill?
Matthew Hayball, yeah.
Hayball, okay. Yeah, especially after that 29-yard punt, Calvin.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they got Hayball on the roster just in case they can't get that guy. They can't grab Presley or someone else. So at least they have a punter. But I don't think the punter is staying. Were you surprised that Charlie Smith didn't beat out grouping?
No, not at all. I don't think anybody should be surprised at this because you look at it this way. Smith has been booming kicks through practice, pregame warmups. 60-plus yarders regularly. But every time the Saints had a 50-plus yard field goal opportunity in the preseason, who did they trot out there? Blake Grupe. And that made me scratch my head because I was like, okay, if I'm Dennis Allen, I know what Blake gives me because I've had a year of him already. I want to see what if this is a competition, I want to see what the new guy can do in a bona fide game situation. I don't think that this was ever a serious competition because of that reason. But the Saints also realized this. Charlie Smythe, Irish kicker, he falls under the international rule, which means the Saints can immediately put him on the practice squad without him going through the waiver period. They could declare him as the international player exemption that every team has. Therefore, he's not subjected to waivers and cannot be poached off of the practice squad by another team. The only way that happens is a Smythe Smith. I'm not even certain how you pronounce it, but if Charlie was elevated to the active roster during the year and then demoted back to the practice squad, at that point, the practice squad rules kick in and another team can poach him. Until or unless that happens, Charlie is untouchable, and the Saints realize that.
Right. And I think that's what they want to do. I mean, you got to think about like Blake Gilligan, what they did with him, Thomas Morstead's last year. Somebody written on Twitter, these are all the instant hot takes. Somebody wrote on Twitter that, releasing Gilligan in favor of Headley was a mistake. And I'm going, it's 6 one way, half a dozen the other. Gilligan they got rid of him because he was out kicking his coverage, so you're getting big returns. He'd have a booming kick, then a shank, and it's like they like no returns first off, but they got Headley because he was an Australian rules punter, and they felt like if we can get a guy who can pin people up against the sideline, we'll go for a less net average, but we'll still be able to pin people and not let any returns go on.
I want to go back to Kyle Hergel for a second and address that question. There were several of us that had Hergel on our active roster predictions for the last 2 weeks, really. And, Kyle really came on strong at the end. And I think that it was noteworthy that even against the Titans, he was the first, he was the sixth lineman in once once the starters had a seat. And I agree with what you said, Alan. I think they're eyeing him up and probably a couple others for the practice squad. But folks, let's not lose our heads here. We're talking about a rookie, an undrafted rookie, on a unit that everybody was trashing from the starters on down. Well, the Saints felt the same way you guys did, folks. The Saints released 7 offensive linemen today. Yes. 7. They came in, they usually carry 9, sometimes even 10 to their active roster initially, and then they'll add, they like to carry 3 to 4 on their practice squad. I still think the 3 to 4 stands. I think they're going to try to bring Hergel, probably Josiah Esram, and maybe Tremaine Ashram. All young guys who came on well at the end there. I think they'll try to get them back to the practice squad. But all you guys that were saying, they need to look at the waiver wire for more offensive linemen. Guys, that's exactly what they plan on doing. That's why they released so many linemen today.
Yeah, I agree. And there's nothing wrong with putting these guys on the practice squad because that's what it's there for. And believe me, 31 other fan bases having this exact same conversation about their team. How can we let this guy go? What's wrong with our coach? They let this guy go. They're idiots. They don't know what they're doing. You're keeping guys. I think even Terran Matthew put it out there. You're letting get rid of guys that are, put skins on the wall to keep guys who haven't done anything. Teams do this. They play with their roster limits because they now have a 16-man practice squad. They can start figuring out what we're going to do, where we're going to go heavy, where we're going to go light, what is our injury situation. So that's why I keep insisting that this is the 53-man roster as of Tuesday, August 27th. Come September, it's going to be a different 53-man roster.
Yep.
You remember a few years ago when the Saints had no kicker?
Yeah.
They cut both kickers.
And I actually thought that that's what they were going to do today with the punters.
Yeah. And I think they just decided, you know what? Let's just have a punter that we feel some confidence in. So we're not sitting there scrambling trying to find a punter the week of the regular season. There's a lot of moving pieces that are still going to be happening. The practice squad will get set tomorrow. Once the waivers complete, they'll start putting the practice squad together, and then we're going to get kind of a better picture of what's going on.
Because remember too, and you pointed this out to me a couple years ago, and it's stuck with me since. There's a rule difference that a lot of average people aren't aware of. that when you're a vested veteran and you first get cut, you do not have to go through the waiver period and wait to
Mm-hmm.
see if you get picked up by a team. You're a bona fide, unrestricted free agent that you could sign or re-sign with any team of your choosing after a 24-hour period. That's significant for guys like Jonathan Abram, Kalike Hudson, who I thought would make the team. I had projected. Even guys like Equanimous St. Brown. By the way, the best nickname for him today was Equifax Credit Report St. Brown. I'm going to go with that from now on. But yeah, I mean, St. Brown, Kalike Hudson, Jonathan Abram, a lot of players that many of us thought would make the team, they're vested veterans. So they don't have to clear a waiver period. So perhaps the thinking too is that the Saints are thinking, okay, and backdoor deals go on with teams and players all the time too. Hey, we're going to release you today. We're going to re-sign you on Thursday after we can make some moves with a Nick Saldiveri or a Kalen Saunders, where we have to wait a period of time before we can place them on an injured reserve.
Yep.
And designate them for return. So that's one of the reasons why NFL rosters are so, you guys wait. After the practice squad is set tomorrow, the rest of the week, Thursday through Sunday or Monday, it's going to be as crazy as it was today with personnel moves.
And I learned that watching, believe it or not, Hard Knocks with the Jets, their first Hard Knocks, where they had the conversation, I think it was Laverius Coles. They were talking to him and said, this is what we're planning on doing. We're going to try and bring you back. And they had the whole conversation telling him, we know that you're available to sign with any team, but, don't do anything yet. Our goal is once we make these roster moves to make space for you to bring you back. Of course, they didn't bring him back, which was always funny to me. But, they, in fact, that was his last year in the league. But, it's those kind of things. If the Saints want to make a trade, you don't know if they have a trade in the works. I kind of thought we'd see a trade yesterday if they were going to make one.
Me too.
But I didn't see anything. So, there's just a lot of moving pieces going on. That's why I'm just like, okay, this is step one. Where's step two? What are we doing now? And there are some players that I like that got released today that I do want to talk about. But real quick, Hemisphere asked this question, speaking of roster moves. He's asking, how come we haven't heard anything about a Kamara extension? Is there a meaning behind Mickey not signing AK to a new contract? I think they're in negotiations, but it's amicable negotiations. I don't think Kamara has a time limit on it. I think they know that. I think they'd like to get it, borrow a Sean Payton phrase, sooner rather than later. They like to get it done sooner rather than later. But I think it's one of these things where there's a lot of give and take, and both sides are pretty adamant about what they want. And they're not really budging on it. So we just don't hear anything. But I don't think it's to the point now where the two sides are going, well, something's going to give. Right. It's not at that point. It's just, this is my position. This is your position. And let's see who blinks first. And we'll start again. But I don't think Kamara is going to be holding out. I don't think anything like that. I know. I've been trying to get a mic. Problem is, I have an iPad, and they don't make very many good mics for an iPad. I've tried 2 of them so far, and neither of them work worth a damn. So I'm trying. I'm going through the Apple Store, and these people suck.
Yeah,
that's the polite way of putting it. So I'm sorry y'all can't hear me. I'm trying to remember to speak up loudly and lean it forward into the camera, but this is my trade-off. You get a more muted sound from me, but y'all not getting the freezes and disruptions anymore because it's going through my iPad instead of my laptop.
Well, and I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I have an open mic, so I try to make a conscious effort of projecting my voice, but in doing so, I can come across, when I've rewatched your show and my show, I've noticed that I can come across loud or I have an echo or something like that. So, yeah, I'm on the other side of the spectrum. Hey, it's a work in progress. We'll figure it all out.
Yeah.
But I agree with what you were saying about the Camara extension. Hemisphere, at least I think you were the one that asked the question. I apologize if it was somebody else. Remember that the Saints very, very, very rarely make contract negotiations public, either from the player side or the team side. I don't see any reason why this extension doesn't get done relatively soon.
Mm-hmm.
There's also no reason to believe that there's animosity on either side, because if there was, Camara would have walked out of camp, did a hold in, or perhaps even demanded a trade, and none of that has happened. The Saints aren't offering, is shopping Camara around that we know of, so they don't feel any animosity on their side. I think just like we suspected from the very start, the sticking point here is probably a minor one. It's probably a handful of guaranteed money, one direction or another, and perhaps a year or a voided year added on at the end, at some point, to either save the team cap space or make the player a potential free agent a year beforehand. It's usually the minute details of
Yeah.
that final deal that sometimes, believe it or not, can take a few weeks to work out. And if you look at it from the Saints' perspective, from the franchise's perspective, they probably said to Alvin, look, we're trying to get our roster solidified right now. This is where our focus is. Once that happens, there's going to be, and yes, I know what we just said about there'll be continuing personnel moves, but the major points have already gotten taken care of. So you get that major step checked off of your off season going into regular season checklist,
Mm-hmm.
then you can concentrate on other teams or other things. That's when you typically see contract extensions being worked out. The Cowboys just re-signed their receiver to a big extension. There was another big extension not too long ago on the defensive side. I forget which team. You're going to start to see these contract extensions, contract renegotiations really come to a head now, and I would expect that with Alvin Kamara as well.
Absolutely. I think it's going to get done. I mean, Loomis says, it's hard telling a player that he's not worth the money he
Right.
used to be worth. And I think a lot of people read that into that's what he's telling Alvin Kamara. I think the biggest thing is the guaranteed money. I think they've got the parameters set up. I think it's how we're going to do the guaranteed money. I think Alvin wants a lot of guaranteed money that the Saints just are not willing to put out right now. And so I that's why I said I don't think it's to the point of a panic yet, that we're not going to get the guy, he's going to get mad and want to hold out or whatever. I think it's just, this is what I want. This is what I think I'm entitled to. And the Saints are like, yes, you are entitled to as much money as we can give you, but this is all we can give you. So, and until those two move, that's not going to change. Real quick, did you see what they did to the locker room, the Saints locker room? Oh, it's the club. It's the club. I mean, they've got LED lighting and club lighting all in this thing. I tell you what, because it just reminded me. Okay, so behind me, I'm playing the Saints NFL Films 2023 Saints team highlight film, and they show a scene where they're in the locker room and just talking. It don't look like that anymore.
No,
it looks like a club.
Mm-hmm.
Black, with multicolored lighting around it. I couldn't see the smoke machine, but there's a smoke machine in there. So and it's a huge open space, and that's the big thing that the players love.
Yeah.
There's a lot of space in the middle. There's no alleys you've got to walk through anymore. The lockers line the walls, and they made the locker room bigger. And they left the middle wide open. There's nothing in the middle anymore. So it's really nice. And they just redone that locker room, 2011, 2012, something like that. So, again, for the Super Bowl, this is all the stuff they're doing for the Super Bowl. So I'm really looking forward to seeing all these changes they made. We won't see the locker room, but I'm looking forward to seeing everything else. Okay, so let's talk about a couple players that have gotten released that fans are either talking about or I'm talking about. One of them is a former first-round pick of the Minnesota Vikings, the safety from Georgia, Lewis Sign. I like him. I thought, he got injured his rookie year, and he struggled the second year to come back and really play at the level they expected him as a first-round pick. So they're cutting bait with him this year. To me, if there's a position that Dennis Allen knows how to coach, and we all are critical of Dennis Allen's coaching, but there's a position he knows how to coach, it's secondary. He gets that secondary straight. And I'm glad you're here, Hemisphere, honestly. I'm very happy with that you guys bother to check the show out and that you comment and participate. I really enjoy that. Yeah, Club Poitras. You're right about that. But going to Sign, coming from Georgia, big hitter. I think they kind of had him in the wrong position. I think they were trying to use him as a free safety, and I think he's more of a strong safety, which is exactly what the Saints need. A good hammer at the strong safety position. How do you feel about him?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That was one of the bigger surprises that came out on the league waiver wire that I thought. Not because Sign played well, because I agree that he didn't, and he was hurt. But just because he was a first-round draft pick, and the team, the Vikings were giving up on him so quickly. We see just the opposite taking place in New Orleans with Peyton Turner, Isaiah Foskey, of course, Trevor Penning. So yeah, I do agree that from the pro tape that I've seen of Sign, I've always felt like he was in the wrong position too. If you want to make player comparisons, you look at a Lewis Sign and you see a guy like a Malcolm Jenkins, a guy that you want down in the box, a guy that you want in run support, kind of an extra linebacker kind of thing. And the only time you want him back in a deep safety role is if it's in a too high alignment. I saw that Amos got cut. I was actually hoping for a signing. He was on my short list of safeties to sign when free agency hit, kind of the bargain safety kind of guys. But yeah, I mean, Sign is a young guy. Like you said, not only Dennis Allen, but Joe Woods and Marcus Robertson too. They're all defensive back coaches by trade. So if you're looking to get younger at the position and more athletic, I think that Lewis Sign is definitely a more athletic version of what they liked in Jonathan Abram. So yeah, if you want to read underneath of the tea leaves a little bit, maybe speculate. Again, if you release a guy like Abram, you feel like he's the type of guy that you can get back if you don't get what you're really looking for, which is perhaps a younger, more athletic version of the guy that you just released.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm watching that very carefully. I have no insight to know whether the Saints are even interested, but I would like for them to at least kick the tires on him. Of course, receivers have all been the rage because as soon as a receiver gets released, and they've had some pretty good receivers released, every Saints fan in the world is like, sign him, sign him, sign him. We talked about Tim Patrick off the air, but Tim Patrick, of course, he got released by the Broncos, and he got signed by Detroit. The guy hadn't played in 2 years.
Yeah.
So I don't know why people were just losing their minds over him, because I'm like, we just got rid of a guy hasn't been playing much for 2 to 3 years. Um, I don't see it now. There, there's one guy I had to ask who the heck D no is it DPJ?
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't even know who he was. I just saw the initials. Peebles from the Browns receiver.
Yeah, Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Yeah, and I'm like, who is that guy? I don't even know.
He's a big-bodied pass catcher that kind of got lost in the shuffle when the Browns released him and he signed with Detroit last year. But yeah, he is. We know the Saints like their big-bodied receivers. That's why Equifax credit report was signed in the first place. So yeah, I mean, Peoples-Jones, I could see why some Saints fans would be excited about him. A guy I'm watching. I know, like you said, Tim Patrick got released by the Broncos. Another guy that got released by Denver, and I thought would really make that team, was Brandon Johnson. He was making some really athletic catches. Loved the separation that I saw him get. Brandon Johnson is the kind of guy that would add a speed element, a deep threat element as a fourth receiver if you brought him in. The kind of guy that could really challenge a Mason Tipton or a Bub Means, to play up to their expectations, because I think we can all agree that the receiving core throughout training camp and preseason was not what we were expecting it to be. We were expecting younger, faster, with a more consistent separation ratio, and we saw none of that. So, and that's what's making people think or believe or hope that they're going to sign these receivers. Noah Brown is another interesting name to watch that got released from the Texans. But yeah, those are the three names that stuck out to me: was Peoples-Jones, Noah Brown, Brandon Johnson. I don't want to hear the garbage of Kadarius Toney.
Oh God, no.
I don't want to hear we should bring Michael Thomas back. If Michael Thomas stepped through a time machine first, I'm all for it.
Right.
Terrace Marshall, don't want to hear it. You're right, Calvin. Terrace Marshall is for you LSU fans, I think, mainly. But yeah, he couldn't even be a standout receiver for the garbage offense that existed in Carolina. What the hell makes you think that he would be an upgrade to what the Saints have right now? And that's what you really have to look at. And I know, Alan, you asked this question. I could hear the rage in your tweets when you would ask the question. If you're going to sign such and such, who the hell are you going to cut? Who can you justify him replacing? And that's the question that the Saints have to answer right now. If we go after a Peoples-Jones or a Noah Brown or a Lewis Sign, who are we replacing on the roster? And is it really an upgrade? That's what fans, you have to ask yourself, rather than I just want change for the sake of change.
Yeah. Well, and it's because they've heard of these people. Terrace Marshall's an LSU receiver, so they know who that guy is.
Right.
Now, if I tell you he's another Michael Clayton, and he's instead of a Devery Henderson, that sort of puts it in perspective. But people always think that, and this is how people's mind work, especially on Twitter. But we can get this guy and we can fix him and we can make him a good player. Look, maybe under Sean Payton you could do that with some players, but not. Sean Payton showed you couldn't do it with defensive players.
Yeah,
I don't trust Dennis Allen taking an offensive player and fixing them so they're productive as an offensive player for this offense. I just don't. I mean, yeah, I was just going to mention this. John Mechie is a guy that a lot of rumors were flying around about the Texans are shopping him.
Yeah. And he didn't get cut today, so he's still on the team.
Right. They cut Noah instead, which kind of surprised me because
Yeah.
everything I kept reading was Woods is out the door. They're getting rid of Woods. Woods is going. He's 32 years old. We're going to get rid of him. We're going to go with all young receivers. And the position he had as like the mentor has been replaced by Stephon Diggs.
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting rid of him. And he's made the team. Noah got cut. And Mechie was being shopped. You know, and I can remember quite a few people were all talking about how important it was that they wanted the Saints to draft Mechie. You know, they wanted to get him on the team, and you know, it's all those things. You're not going to find a stud receiver out there right now. You might find a guy who can do some things for you, but you're basically going to get kind of what you got rid of, you know, a Marcus Callaway with a little more name recognition. You're looking at a guy who's probably going to be the fourth or fifth receiver on the team. So, like
At
you
best.
said, yeah, you're competing with Bub Means. You're competing with Cedric Wilson. So, are you really getting an upgrade from Cedric Wilson on a lot of these guys? And I think that's the question that they have to ask themselves all the time. You're not really getting an upgrade. And I'm sorry. I think A.T. Perry played his way into the third wide receiver position.
I do too.
It wasn't spectacular. He dropped too many passes for my taste. But, man, we're going to talk about him in a minute because I had the Texans game on behind us for a little while. And I mean, not the Texans, Titans game on behind us for a little while. But, man, how many passes did those receivers drop in that game? It was just – so I just feel like that's the kind of guys you're going to be getting. You know, that's why I don't want a Tony because I watched him drop friggin' passes as a Chief. And that's a elite offense.
Yep.
You know, so I don't know. It's receivers were the last position I was looking at, unless somebody really that I thought could help us as a possession receiver. And I guess that's why people talk about that guy Peebles so much. But unless you find a possession receiver that can really do something for you as the fourth guy, that's an upgrade from Cedric Wilson, I just don't see anything out there. I was watching more of the offensive linemen that were getting released. To see if I saw any tackle guard combinations.
There weren't many, man.
No. And we've gotten to the point now that people on Twitter were actually talking about Alex Leatherwood.
Yep.
And I'm going, man, he's been in the league for 3 years and he's been on 4 teams.
Yep.
The Raiders cut him after his rookie season. If that's not a red flag.
A first-round pick.
Yeah, first-round pick, 17th pick overall. If that's not a red flag that you're getting somebody who is worse than what you see right now out of Trevor Penning, I'm sorry. I just, no.
Yep. The one name that jumped out to me, and I just made fun of LSU fans, so I guess I'm going to call myself a hypocrite. La'el Collins got released by the Bills. Now,
like 40.
I was going to ask you, how old he actually was, because I mean, there's no doubting his best football is behind him. But didn't he start for the Bengals last year and have at least a decent season, or am I thinking of someone else?
I don't know. I can't remember if he did or not, honestly.
I'll have to look it up.
He was out of the same draft class as Andres Pete.
Was he?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're talking an 11, 12-year career now. I think a lot of people were calling for him last year and the year before because he was with the Cowboys for a long time. And I remember on draft day, people pissed because they took on Andres Pete instead of Collins.
Yeah.
Because I think Collins had some kind of, he was involved in some kind of rape situation in an apartment in Baton Rouge, but he wasn't even, his name was just thrown in there. He wasn't even really involved in it at all. So he fell out of the first round. And then he said, well, if I don't go in the first round, don't bother drafting me because I'm not going to report. So he was an undrafted free agent and went to the Cowboys. And he played for the Cowboys for a while. The thing was that Collins was, okay. I don't know if I shared this one yet or not. He went to preschool with Nick Saban. But yeah, he never really became the elite left tackle. He was a good left tackle, but not an elite one. So, and now he's much older. So it's just, again, they got guys in the street who are about like him right now, that you're not really getting an upgrade. And I get it. There are a lot of guys I'm like, man, we just need bodies, functional bodies. And you watch all 3 preseason games. Once all the starters were gone, it was pretty ugly. It was pretty ugly. So
and again, I mentioned Lyle Collins because that's a name I recognize. That was a Pro Bowl caliber blocker. But I think, if the Saints, and there's no if, when the Saints go looking for offensive linemen that are now available, chances are very good that they're going to look for younger guys in systems that are similar to theirs. Kubiak coached in San Francisco, so who'd the 49ers just release? Kubiak coached in Minnesota. Who did the Vikings just release? Andrew Janocko coached in Chicago. Who did the Bears just release? Benton, I think, last coach for the Jets. Who did New York release? Those kind of things, I think. I think that we'll see those kind of linemen be brought in by the Saints in the next few days.
I think so too, and I definitely agree. They're going to be younger and cheaper, and that's also the case with these receivers. Yeah, if they're going to bring a receiver in, they're going to bring in a young, cheap receiver. And I don't mean like that bargain basement shopping, but they're not going to sign an old veteran.
No,
they don't want an old veteran on this team.
No, they don't need an old veteran on this team.
They need somebody who's going to be available for 17 games and somebody they can kind of rely on for 17 games. So it's kind of, it's a tough position to be in, but it's why you're not going to see a lot of old veterans coming in to this team, because they had that opportunity to do that earlier. They could have signed a bunch of and really overpaid a bunch of free agents the first couple of days of free agency, and they're not going to do it. They didn't do it then. They're not going to do it now.
Right. And I think that once I get my old weary ass out of bed tomorrow, and I'll be out of bed early because of Will in school. But once I get motivated to write something, this occurred to me a couple of days ago. Some of the names that the Saints signed, young guys that were released by other teams, cast-offs, for lack of a better word. Lance Moore.
Yeah.
Willie Snead. Will Lutz. Taysom Hill. None of those guys, if Twitter was more popular back then and Facebook and the rest of social media, I could just picture some of you Saints fans. Why are they signing this guy? He couldn't even make the Browns. He could. The Ravens gave up on a kicker, and the Saints are taking a reject kicker. The Saints are taking a guy, a fourth string quarterback who doesn't even have a position from the. I could just hear it now. But I mean, and even Willie Snead had 2 really, really good seasons. But Lance Moore, a team Hall of Famer. Taysom Hill will be a team Hall of Famer. Will Lutz will be a team Hall of Famer.
But, and it's funny because I can remember, and I'm not going to hold John Hendricks to this, or Barry Hurstis, who is now passed on. But Barry Hurst was livid that the Saints brought in Will Lutz. Livid.
Yeah.
He felt they should have gone ahead and signed, I don't know, Hawker or some other kicker that he liked more than Lutz. You know, the kicker that the Bucks ended up taking in the second round, and I want to say it was 2016, maybe. John Hendricks really was gaga over him.
Yep.
Stressing the importance of the Saints draft a kicker and draft them early. And I brought up Russell Slave, and I brought up, I really hammered him on it. And he tweeted, it's really troublesome that Saints fans just don't see the problem with the kicker that, I do. And it's like, I don't see a problem with it. But drafting a kicker, it's like in fantasy football. You never take a kicker high. You take them at the end of your fantasy draft because it really doesn't matter. It's just, I'm like that with kickers. They're fifth round and below. You can start looking at kickers. People were mad that we drafted Thomas Morstead in the fifth round, speaking of drafting kickers. Why are we drafting a punter this early? What are we going to do with a punter? And sure enough, he ended up being one of the most popular Saints players ever. Taysom Hill, if I remember the comments on Taysom Hill just on Facebook, basically was, well, maybe Sean's looking at him to be the quarterback of the future. Maybe he's looking at him as a possible quarterback. And it's really when he started to show up, and I'll never forget this quote as long as I live. I can't think of the special teams coach's name anymore, but he was the old special teams coach at the Saints hired. He had to walk with a cane. He beat cancer. He was Sean Payton's kicker, special teams coach in 2017 and 2018. And
I know who you mean. I just don't remember the name either.
Yeah, he was an old, grouchy-looking guy. And the quote was, and I know it's a family show, but we're going to skip the family part for a minute. He saw Taysom Hill walk around shirtless in the locker room. And he says, "Who's that Hercules-looking motherfucker?" And Sean says, "That's Taysom. That's going to be one of our quarterbacks." He goes, "God damn, that dude can play almost anything right now." And that's when they started to try him on special teams because he could run. And next thing you know, it starts expanding. He starts playing special teams. He blocks kicks. And then he's playing on offense. And I can remember, you go back and watch the 2017 highlights and 2018 highlights when you had Buck and Aikman calling the game. They're like, that's their quarterback, backup quarterback running out there on special teams. And Aikman makes a comment. I asked Sean, what happens if he gets hurt out there? He says, well, that's okay. He's depth, come back next year. There's a lot of moves right now that the Saints are going to make that most of us are going to like, well, why are they bringing in this guy? Who is this guy? Why do we have this guy around? And it turns out that guy ends up being one of the most important signings the Saints have ever made.
Yeah. Anybody that you find yourself, I'm not going to say enraged because we've been poking fun at Saint social media for, years now. Mm-hmm. But any player that you found yourself really surprised, at least initially, that the Saints did not keep on the active roster?
Not really, because they kept everybody I thought they were going to keep that made the top, I guess, 22, 25 players of the roster. I pretty much had all those guys nailed. I knew the back half of the roster was going to change a little bit. The guys that we kind of talked about, Jalen Ford, didn't expect him. Tipton didn't expect him. But I had those guys swapped out with other special teams guys.
Right.
I guess No, I really can't. I mean, the running backs maybe, but then again, who are you going to get to replace these guys? I thought Mims had played himself into the third running back position, possibly even the second,
Yeah.
over Jamal Williams. I know a lot of people we need to get rid of Jamal Williams and keep either those other two backs, the UL back, who he had a great game, but he's playing against Tennessee, who was a 4-12 team or 6-11 team last year, playing against their third and fourth teamers. If you want to see if I want to be surprised by something, I was surprised that Tennessee came out with their starters and played them as long as they did. I kept thinking the whole time, Callahan must be looking at his team like going, these guys played like shit all camp. I haven't watched them preseason, so I don't know. But these guys have played like shit all camp. Your ass is playing in this third preseason game. You're not getting no rest. Bullshit on that.
Exactly. None of you deserve a day off.
Right. And, they're marching up and down the field, and I'm just like, what are you evaluating at this point? You're playing guys, most of those guys who are out there got cut today. There was a couple guys out there, obviously, that were good, that were playing. But for the most part, especially going to the second quarter, I'm going, really? You still got some of these starters out here? So I think that was only really surprised me, because I said, you really didn't get a good, now it was a good evaluation for the Saints, because you saw guys playing against NFL caliber talent. But, when they got up 14-0 or 10-0 early, I'm going, who cares?
Right.
You're playing, it's varsity against JV.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, it's not, ooh, you beat up on the JV team.
But
I'm sorry. I wasn't even mad. I felt bad for Haener, because I thought Haener really kind of got the short end of the stick, because he had to go up against a starting defense. Now, granted, he's going to, if he would ever come in as number 2 guy, but he's playing with, the Saints' second and third teamers all over the place, because they want to evaluate everybody.
With the exception of the offensive line. The majority of the offensive line starters were in there, which, by the way, I was thrilled about. The more reps you give Trevor Penning, the happier I am. So I did like that move. But yeah, I mean, I felt bad for Haener. I mean, you threw Haener out there against its tight starting defense, which the Tennessee is not a good team at all. They're going to be one of the worst in the league this year.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, Haener had his third team skill position guys against the Titans starters. So, and I think that showed.
Yeah. And that's not to take away from what Rattler did, because to be fair, Haener got to start again in the third quarter too, when he was playing the Titans backups, and he didn't look that much better. He had more time, but I thought Rattler completely outplayed him in that game. So
He did, but Haener outplayed Rattler against San Francisco. They have been back and forth. But yeah, I mean, the reason I asked you that question is because a lot of the Twitter rage, or well, actually a lot of the Facebook rage that I saw was about Jacob Kibodi, the running back. And I kept saying to people, I said, I like him too. I could see him being brought back for the practice squad. Oh, some other team's going to sign. Why? Because he had one good half.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of you, I doubt, wouldn't even know who this young man is if he didn't play at UL. Because, I mean, he had a decent camp, but that was it. He played decent the first 2 preseason games, but that was it. He did not outplay Jamal Williams, certainly didn't outplay Jordan Mims, and didn't even outplay James Robinson. I'm rooting for Kibodi. I like him. I'd like to see him back on the practice squad. And how could you not love how hard he runs? But he based off of the other players on this ride, and it goes back to the question that you ask people all day long, who would you cut for him? Well, yeah, I'd cut Jamal Williams just because you don't like him.
Right.
Yeah, and then the ABCs come out, or ABDCs, anybody but ABDAs, anybody but Dennis Allen's. That just proves that the coach doesn't know what he's doing. Oh my God, this conversation is over.
Yeah. Yeah, and and I get it. I did and Calvin, I don't know if you heard me, but yeah, Sweat did play for the Titans. I saw him out there.
Yeah.
Most of the first half, was out there. But yeah, I mean, it's just preseason, like Buddy Delaberto said, preseason is an illusion. You get a false sense of how good a player is because of what they're doing in preseason, these glorified practices. It looks like a game. They play like it's a game, but it's not really a football game because they're not trying to win. They're not. Now, the Titans did open their playbook up considerably, and I thought that was amusing too because I'm like, man, that coach must be really mad at his team that he's playing like this. Because the thing you want out of that third preseason game, number one, you want to evaluate people, but number two, you don't want anybody hurt because you're playing in 2 weeks, and those games count. So you really don't want to play anybody that can get hurt, and yet they're out there playing them. So hey, that's their team, that's their problem, whatever. I found that amazing. And I expected a guy to have a game like that just because, he did. I'm sorry, Anna's asking this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but hasn't Condre had health issues from the start? This training camp, yes. He showed up and pulled his hamstring. And it must be pretty severe. And Dennis Allen has been making an example out of him, basically chewing him out almost every press conference when they bring his name up.
Yeah.
And somebody had said something stupid on social media. That's very unprofessional to call out a player that way. Really? Because if you watch Bill Parcells, ask Bill Parcells about who was Terry Glenn. Well, he said, has a pulled hamstring, and she hasn't gotten back out there yet. If that's not unprofessional, and Sean Payton did it too. Payton and Parcells both had a habit of referring to players who had not been practicing or not been healthy or needed that tough love as the player.
The player or the number.
Yeah. Yeah, you didn't have a name.
Mm-mm.
You were the player. Like the coach you were so far removed from the coach's mind, he doesn't even remember your name.
Yeah.
He knows your number, like you said, number 80. So I don't want to hear about that's not professional. There's a reason they're saying these things. This message is getting across to the player. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the frustrating thing is Miller has a lot of talent. We saw that in the last game of the season. We have seen glimpses of it in other games. Mm-hmm. So you see why the Saints drafted him. But it's tough when someone's battling injuries, but you feel like he's nursing these injuries and he's just not being a professional, not coming in the best possible shape that he should be in. And as a result, he hasn't been out there to play. Mm-hmm. But that's why they didn't cut him. They are going to give him a shot at coming back. But I think he's on his last straw.
Yeah, I do too. And the thing with I joked on Jordy Hultberg's show that one of the reasons that Dennis Allen was pissed off is because Kendre Miller has been a pain in the ass from the start.
Mm-hmm.
Last year he came into camp because with a serious knee injury that sidelined him for the national championship game. Then he hurt his ankle, then he hurt his hamstring, then he got a concussion, and then this offseason we're all excited. All of us are excited about what is he going to do after a healthy offseason in Clint Kubiak's new offense, and then what does he do? He injures his hamstring in the first half hour, and I'll give him benefit the first hour of the first practice.
Mm-hmm.
If he'd have gotten hurt in OTAs, if he'd have gotten hurt in minicamp, the team would have been able to put him on the PUP list to start and just kept him there and not have to worry about a roster spot.
No.
But no, the fact that he just played one play of training camp meant he was not eligible for the PUP list. That would piss me off if I was a coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, what the Saints did with Miller, with the new modified injured reserve rule, you could do this with up to two players, where you could designate them as an IR during the final cuts without and designate them for return, without losing them for the season, and without them counting as a roster spot. So they had no choice but to do that with Kendre Miller. He's a third-round pick, as you said, and I completely agree. He has flashed enough talent where if I was another team and I saw him released, I'd pounce. I would. They'd lose him.
Absolutely.
So with Kendre, you at least now get to drag your feet for the next 5-6 games while he gets the mandatory period that he has to miss. While you see what Mims can do, while you see what Williams can do, basically what your entire backfield can do. And when Miller comes back, or if Miller, like you said, drags his feet, I had a setback and you know what, Kendrick, we're done with you.
Mm-hmm.
This is his last chance. I believe it anyway. But they were never going to cut him. They made the move the way they did so that way they could get him back, hopefully, this season, but don't have to use a roster spot in the process.
Calvin's asking if Kendre was still coming to that number one spot. No disrespect to Kamara. Honestly, if you want to be perfectly honest, if I was probably a fly on the wall in the Saints offensive coach's room, I think he was. I think that was the plan, to turn Kendre as your number one back. Alvin Kamara is your pass catching back. We're going to do a lot of formations and stuff to get Alvin Kamara in the space. But as far as the primary ball carrier, I think that's what they had envisioned for Miller. They really did. And that's another reason why Allen is pissed.
Yeah.
Because here you are effing my offense from the get-go, and I'm going to get blamed for this. Because, yeah, here I am. I'm giving you a shot, and you're going to be a focal point of my offense, and you're so lazy, you can't take care of your health well enough to show up to camp and play. Yeah, I'm pissed. And as a fan, I'm pissed because I want him to be successful. And that's the thing that gets me to seeing social media is like, well, that's good because I want this team to go 3-14 and everyone get fired and we can get new people in here and stuff like that. Well, you know what? You got to watch a lot of this shit for a long time before you get to be good again. And
that's a great segue. That clip coming up as you're saying that.
Yeah. You got to watch this shit for a long time. And I've already watched that for 20 years. I don't need to see that anymore. I saw it come back with Ditka. I don't need to see that anymore. And it's not going to be, the 1999 Saints, they were 3-13. Oh, look, 2020 Saints, 10-6, won a division, won a playoff game. It ain't going to happen that way, fellas. That was lightning in a bottle. And yeah, you got it in 2006 too. But Sean Payton was building something for long term, and things just kind of broke their way, and it helped that the NFC was really bad. But that is the Superdome I know, okay? Yep. That's the Superdome I remember. And I don't need to see that again. I hate that. That's a miserable way to go to a game. Because
The reality is closer to exactly what you just said. The Saints between 67 and 87, the Lions for the last 25 years before last year, the Browns for the last 30 years before last year, the Bengals through the 1990s. That's the reality of it usually. And again, the Saints fans that just they act like Dennis Allen or Derek Carr or Mickey Loomis or maybe all three of them killed a close relative or a close friend. It's that kind of personal hatred, the kind I have for Aaron Rodgers, frankly, but that's another story for another time. But yeah, they let their hatred take over their fandom for the team. And to root for the team to lose, okay. Derek Carr is not my ideal quarterback for the team I root for. Dennis Allen is not my ideal head coach for the team I root for, but that's who I got. I'm going to root for them to succeed. Now, it's my job to analyze why they aren't succeeding if they aren't. That's a different story. I'm not rooting for it to happen. And the ones that are, I don't know how you can call yourself a fan. And they'll counter with, "Oh, I've been a fan since blah blah, 1906." No, you haven't. If those words come uttering out of your mouth, then you're not a true fan of whatever team that you're saying. It's another thing if you're sitting there saying, "I think this team could go 3-14." That's different. But a lot of these idiots are literally, like you say, I hope this team goes 3-14 just so they could get rid of Dennis Allen, just so they could get rid of Derek Carr. Oh my God, I wish a lightning bolt of sanity would strike these people.
Because and I get it. I'm the same as you. Dennis Allen is not my favorite coach. Derek Carr is not my favorite quarterback. But I want these guys to be successful only because I don't want the carousel. I don't, because that's what you get. If you're lucky, you get one. Okay. If you're lucky, you get a coach. You can get a Jim Mora coach. You can get a Jim Haslett coach who's going to win some games for you. But you probably aren't getting the quarterback too. Or if you get a quarterback who's got the potential like Aaron Brooks did, maybe he doesn't grow and you never get past that 8-8, 7-9 hump, which is kind of like where we are right now. That's kind of where we are as far as a franchise. We're a 9-8, 7-10, maybe 10-7 range team. We're probably a really good draft class away from getting over that hump. And I know people are like, well, you're not going to do that with Dennis Allen. You're not going to do that with Derek Carr. Jim Mora won with Bobby Hebert. Bobby Hebert isn't that much. In fact, I think he's worse than Carr was. We got to 10-6 with Aaron Brooks. We got to 9-7 with Aaron Brooks. And Aaron Brooks had some better stats, but Jim Haslett made the same kind of. He wasn't even as good a defensive coordinator as Dennis Allen. He made a lot of bad calls too. A lot of bad decisions. The heavy lunch bunch, my God. Tassucky Jones, you just go down the list of boneheaded things that they did. So I just wanted to work. So it's just, I get the weaknesses, but I want these guys to work. And that's how I feel about Kendre Miller. I want him to work because it makes the team a better team, and that team is more enjoyable to watch. Teams that losing becomes a habit. And then you start attracting losing players. Then you get desperate, and you start bringing in, Brandon Browners and people like that, because you're just desperate for something. And it just it's a spiral. It's a spiral that I don't think people really appreciate because you don't have a Sean Payton here anymore. You don't have a Drew Brees that can overcome those kind of guys. But okay, so we talked about all the moves they made, and some guys that we think may or may not be around. And I know you're at the cigarette portion of the program. What is your prediction for this team? If I ask you to predict where you think this team will be, what is your season prediction? I know we've gone through the schedule and stuff like that, but kind of looking at the roster, getting an idea of just what we've seen in the preseason, what is your prediction? Has it changed at all from the way you felt when we first broke down the schedule?
I'll tell you, and I'm not fully convinced myself, but this is where I'm leaning. Because as you know, I always do a season prognostication article before the season opener. And I kind of have the skeleton of it set up right now. And Alan, I have the Saints winning the NFC South at a 10-7 record, and probably losing in the first round of the playoffs. But as I always say, when you get to the playoffs, it depends on three things: health, momentum, and matchups. So that's another story for January, hopefully. But I've said it, and you saw me. We spoke on the same thread. I don't remember whether it was Facebook or Twitter, where I said that I think the ceiling, this team could actually pull out 10 or 11 wins if everything falls just right. But I also think that the team has a potential to turn in a 5-12 season. I don't remember ever being this wide, certainly never during the Sean Payton era, being this wildly on the spectrum as far as my expectations go. But I mean, there's not many teams that have a linebacking core or a cornerback unit as good as New Orleans. Olave might not be an elite number one receiver, but he's a pretty damn good one. Yeah. You have skill weapons with Jawan, matchup weapons with Jawan, Rashid, Kamara. That if you get a little bit of blocking in front of Carr, and I know that that's a big if. We talk about this week after week after week. But if you give Carr a little bit of blocking, you set a balanced offense. That defense is going to win a lot of games for you. And I'm not nearly as gaga on the Falcons as a lot of people are. The last I checked, Kirk Cousins is still Kirk Cousins.
He's Derek Carr.
Yeah,
he's no different than Derek Carr.
Tampa Bay will still be the chief competitor for the Saints, in my view. Carolina will be an improved team, but not nearly enough. They still got some work to do to even get to 500. So I look at the division games alone, and I say to myself, I'm like, the Saints could easily go 5-1 in this division. And you do that, and you nitpick at the other winnable games on your schedule, and that's how I come up with the 10 wins. Would I go to Vegas and bet a sizable sum on it? No. But I can see this being a 10-win first round playoff team.
My thing has always been, you've got 6 divisional games, okay? You go 4-2 or 5-1. They went 4-2 last year with that horrible offense, okay? They went 4-2 last year. You go 4-2 or 5-1 in our division, that takes you halfway to whatever the record's going to be. So the first half of the schedule is murder, and I've already said, if you come out of that first 6 games at 3-3, you did a hell of a job coming out at 3-3. The back half of the schedule, and this is the part that's going to piss off the anti-Dennis Allen crowd, the back half of the schedule is very favorable for the Saints to make a run. I don't know what kind of run they're going to make. I don't know if they can make a run. They haven't yet.
Right.
I don't think Dennis Allen's team's ever won more than 2 games in a row.
He hasn't. One time, I think it was last year, they won 3.
Okay. But,
that's not much of a winning streak.
Right. So you're going to have to win go on a pretty good run at the end to win the division, get in the playoffs and all that stuff if you start out poorly in the first half. But again, if you go 5-1 or 4-2 in the division, you're halfway there. You just need to win 5 or 6 games, and there are 5 or 6 games you can win in the back half of this schedule, including a bullshit win. Say you beat the Cowboys on a bullshit win because Dak Prescott just has a
Right.
brain fart and throws a pass right to Kool-Aid McKinstry, and he takes it off for a pick 6. And I think the defense is good enough that the defense is going to keep you hanging around a lot of games that you can win these games 9-6, 12-10. They'll be miserable to watch if you like offense, but it's a win. Okay, there's no style points. So
Well, and you look at they play the Raiders, the Chargers, the Redskins, the Giants, folks, the Broncos. These are bad football teams, at least on paper. That's 5 games right there.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you go 4-1 in those games, and you go 4-2 in your division, right there you have 8 wins.
Yep. That's why if everything collapses, they could fall to 3-14 or something like that. I just don't see them collapsing because the defense is going to be too good to collapse. The offensive line's a problem. We didn't even talk about Penning because we just beat him up so much. But Penning has shown improvement each week for what it's worth. I'm still not comfortable with him out there. Pass protection is just terrifying. Run defense and run blocking, though, you turn him loose, and this is why he's still in the team. You turn him loose in the run game, and he's bulldozing people. He's throwing people out the club. I saw him bury a couple of starting Titans players, too. Bury those guys on running plays, but passing, that's a different animal, and you can only hide him for so long. That's why I've been paying attention to the waiver wire, because I don't want to see a revolving door at right tackle where we're going between Penning and Uda back and forth, because I don't think that helps anybody. Nor do I think going to max protect on that side is going to help anybody.
No.
That just limits your offense, what it can do. But I like Patrick in the as a left guard.
Yeah,
I see some positives out of that. I think that's unfortunately when the offensive line is trying to get their stuff straightened out. That's when they look the worst because they play the hardest teams. I think they get better as the season goes on, just like last year. I thought Kubiak calls a better game than Carmichael. So those are all the positive things. If I was going to make a prediction, I'm not quite at 10 wins. I'm at 9 again. I can see 7, but I think the divisional games, I don't believe in the Falcons because they're the Falcons. They'll find a way to lose. That's who they are. That's their identity. Even they could go 15-2 and make the Super Bowl and blow it with another 28-3 meltdown, because that's who the Falcons are. So that's why you don't believe in them. As Falcoholic says, they're like a roller coaster with a horrible safety record. That's who they are. And Tampa, I think, is the number 1 threat, and I think Carolina is just the bottom of the barrel. That's just the way they are. So anyway, Bob, I kept you way too long. Real quick, what you have coming up in the Bayou Blitz this week, and then we can get out of here.
We're going to have practice squad people to talk about tomorrow. Obviously, Brendan and I will delve more into not only who made the roster, but why some of the decisions were made, much like you and I did tonight. Going to take a look throughout the South, NFC South. Any surprising cuts there? I'm going to be able to dig deeper into that tomorrow. I've only taken a quick glimpse. How the Saints 53-man roster as it stands now stacks up against the rest of the division. exactly what we're talking about tonight. Is this team going to be competitive? So it's just that kind of thing. And then of course after this weekend, which is college football happy, we get to preview a real football game.
Absolutely. Yeah, 2 weeks. Football, college football this weekend. No pro football next week though. First Thursday night, first game. Chiefs unveil the banner, so all you Taylor Swifties get to watch Taylor Swift out there. I know y'all looking forward to that. I know some of the people in my family are, but whatever. Anyway, thank you, Bob, for joining us. Thank you, everybody. And I promise the mic will get better. I've got something on order that should work, but we will see. I don't trust these people. It's an iPad. I can't help it. Anyway, thank you guys. We'll see you next time under the dome. Good night, everybody.
Good night.